Our special guest today is Ryan Garlington, Cox Business Account Executive, as well as a community leader. It's my privilege to call him a friend as well. Ryan Garlington, how are you, sir?
I am doing well, Chris, doing very well. Thank you for having me on.
It's my pleasure. I'm so excited to have you on. And just as we get things started, why don't you do a brief introduction? Tell us a little bit about yourself.
So I was born in Portland, Oregon, and lived there until I was 5 years old. And we moved out there, my family, because the roots of my family just started in the church. My grandfather was a pastor, and um, just to kind of fast forward, we ended up moving to Rochester, New York, Pittsburgh, and then I grew up in Atlanta, Georgia. The reason why we moved is because my grandfather and grandmother, they were tragically killed in 1986 on their way to guest speak at a church in Florida. So, we stayed in Portland in that community for a few more years after that. And my mom and aunt, when they made that decision to move, we were so young at that time. So fast forward to now, I'm happily married, and me and my wife, we partner in a business together, also running a PR branding and fashion company. I'm also going on 10 years employed with Cox Communications. I'm in their business department. Me and my wife, we have an awesome blended family, and we love doing a lot. I write poetry. I enjoy music, so I'm learning to play the piano. I grew up playing the violin. Anything I can do outside. So golf is my thing, though. Right now, golf is the ticket to get me to come out the house.
All right. Well, I am not a golfer, but I certainly need to learn. So we'll have to get something going there on the course here. So I shared this question with you: between a room, desk, or a car, which one do you clean first and why?
Yes, I thought about that question. I was going to say, two of them. I would have to say a car, my car. I would clean my car first because I do most of my thinking in my car. And so when I think about it from an environment perspective, I was thinking first I was going to say my office, because my office has to be in a certain order in order for me to be effective. But I do a lot of my thinking in my car. Plus, that's where my wife rides with me too, so it needs to be
Right.
clean.
There's going to be a new statement here, Ryan. Happy car, happy wife, right?
That's
It
right.
it just
That's
doesn't
right.
rhyme.
You gotta help me out with the room. The
Yeah,
car is on me.
that's right. So do you have a favorite word or catchphrase? And if so, why?
Servitude.
Okay.
And the reason is because a lot of people are afraid of that word. Oh, I don't, what you talking about serving? I'm not serving nobody. And you think about it from a perspective of, being less than. And I think of serving someone as a true leader, or how a king would be, or how a president really should be. When you think about the concept, um, the greatest leaders were the ones that were removing obstacles for those that for their constituents. And when you're serving, you're putting somebody else's needs above your own. And what you mentioned earlier before we started the call, you understand how my faith is important to me, and it's all throughout the Bible, and how uh, just the foundation of the greats in the Bible. They were the greatest servants.
Yeah, absolutely right. And there's various styles of leadership, and servant leadership is one of them. I like the word servitude. Okay, so let's kind of dive into this here for a moment. What is more important to an organization in your perspective? Would it be like the mission, the vision, core values, and what about those one of those three things in a community?
And when you say in a community, can you explain that a little bit more, just so I can understand the context?
Yeah, so we know about the business, right? So then
Right.
you had a business within a community. You and I are made up of a community. Our spouses are in community, our children, right? And so what we think of, what I'm saying about
Right.
community,
Okay. I
everything outside the four walls.
fully follow you. So I would have to say that for me, it would be the core values because your vision and your mission can be taught, or those have a better ability to be taught. Your core values, that's foundational. If you understand what I mean, the core values, they're going to be a huge dictator in what your vision is and how you're, and how you go about your mission. But if your core values, in my opinion, are not aligned, correctly, or with your right purpose, then I guess, people will say, if you build your house on, build your house on solid rock or solid foundation. In the core values, that's something that's instilled in you over a long period of time, and it's harder to break if you don't have good core values. So, and the same in the community. When you think about ethics, I kind of tie ethics, core values, all in the same boat. And I believe very firmly that, when you understand the inner workings of why you operate, your core. Okay, so for me, I mentioned, the word servitude. So that for me is a core value that, when I approach any situation, I'm looking how I can be a servant in this situation. And the situation, the mission, the vision can change, but the core value stays the same no matter the mission or the vision. And so my household, we build our house on our faith, on our relationship with God, or as I like to call him, Yah. I call him his Hebrew name. And the no matter what happens between me and my wife, when we can go back to prayer, then that is unifying in and of itself, because we can't disagree on what is in Scripture, which is that's our foundation. So when we go to Scripture, no matter if you're thinking this way, you're thinking that way. Yes, of course, interpretation matters, but the core value and the morals of what we're leaning on is there. So I hope you kind of follow what I was saying.
Gotcha. Yeah. And what I like about what you said is, building your house on a foundation. There is no rhyme or good reason why we would buy a house without it sitting on a foundation, is there?
That
And
is correct.
okay, and that's because
But
we know that if it's not built on a foundation, then any good storm that comes by, or as the eroding dirt underneath the house, the house is going to implode, right? And so you're
correct.
absolutely right on that foundation and the core values there. And you mentioned briefly about leadership as well, and this is how we're going to dive into this. So if we're looking at leadership, tell me how you might define leadership. Maybe it's through definition, the qualities, the character of an individual, that type of thing from your perspective.
So I just because of the overall message, I still looked up the definition, and I would like to share it, because
Yeah,
it
please.
shows leadership is the action of leading a group of people or an organization. And so I like to point out that the word action. So there's something you're having to do in order to lead this group. And so when I look at the word leadership, and I categorize people who have authority over others, when I categorize them as bosses versus leaders, the leaders get categorized because they're doing things to either move that community or body of people forward towards a common goal, towards a vision, towards a mission. So what is the vision? How are we going to get there? The leader is doing things. They're playing a part, an active part, an active role. And even at times, if they're needing to be on the front, on the front line, they're not leading, at all, always behind the desk. They're willing to get from behind the desk and come out to the front line and lead by example. So that's the first thing that I'm looking at when I'm defining a leader, and more specifically categorizing leaders versus bosses.
I like that. There's also, just so everyone that's listening, there's a big difference between leadership and management as well. And
Absolutely.
yeah, okay, good. So when we think about this, what kind of core values do you think a leader should possess?
Um, of course, being a hard worker, being willing to put someone else's feelings, being able to truly put yourself in someone else's shoes, um, being willing to listen and you know, listen quickly and speak with wisdom. You know, speak once you've really you know, assessed the situation and figured out the best way to move forward. So, you know, those are some of the qualities that, you know, I definitely point out in a leader. But, you know, I still go back to, you know, servitude, being willing to say, you know what is it that I can do, you know, to, here's the numbers, you know what our goals are, but how are you doing today? What is it that I can help you so that you can best perform, you know, in this environment? So, or creating an environment that's conducive for high performance. And when you think in that way, what can I do to create the environment? Then I think the sales are going to come. You know, people, they naturally are competitive, or when you're making the right hiring decisions, people naturally want to perform or naturally want to do a good job. So a lot of times there's obstacles that are preventing that.
Exactly. And I'll just say this, people want to be led. They don't want to be managed. There's
Agreed.
that action that takes place. Show me how to do something, and then I'll catch on. And that feeds into what you're saying as well, where people produce based upon the people that are leading them. Um, so what would be something to gauge how successful a leader is?
When I think about the success of a leader, I'm not necessarily looking at how many trophies they have. I'm looking at their ability to duplicate themselves in others.
Okay.
And so what I'm meaning by that is how many other leaders can that leader develop from a career progression standpoint? Um, if that leader was to leave their team, would they skip a beat? Are they going to continue operating just as fluidly as if that leader was still there? And if the answer to that is no, then there's some more work that, you know, obviously we never stop learning, but there's still some opportunity there for that leader. But again, if I'm going to gauge a leader's success, I'm looking at their ability to duplicate themselves in others from a career progression standpoint.
That is really, really golden. Um, because how many businesses are out there, and this is a rhetorical question, but you can answer it if you want. How many businesses are out there performing that way, right? Like a succession, a plan of succession, like who's going to fill my spot? Should I be vacating this seat or this element of responsibility? And that's what you're discussing, right?
That is correct. So you want to have a basis of talent pool, um, and you want to encourage that in your employees. If they don't have, you know, sights on career progression, or that company caring about, you know, what it is they want to do from a next step standpoint, then you're going to get, you know, employees that are just in this, you know, mundane system of not really performing to their best ability. They need to have something to strive for. And you know, if you want to have employees that are willing to, you know, be on the front line for you every day, you got to share that you're willing to invest in them. And the best companies invest in their employees, whether it's tuition assistance, whether it's career progression programs, but more specifically from a leadership standpoint, during those one-on-ones, taking the time to have those conversations. You know, where do you see yourself 2 years, 3 years, 5 years from now? You know, do you see yourself wanting to sit in my seat? How can I help you get there? I would love nothing more than to see you sitting in my seat, because that would tell me how awesome I did as your leader. So and that means that we partnered on this. And a lot of leaders, they lose sight of that. They don't look at leadership as a partnership. You know, you have a job to do, and your number one customer is the employee or the individual that you're leading, not your client. Your number one customer is the individual you're leading.
That's exactly it, Ryan. You know, something I heard a long time ago, I would love to give the name of the person I heard it from, but I can't, so I won't. Leadership is not about titles. It's about influence. And we've had great leaders in the past. We've also had bad leaders. based upon influence. John Maxwell does say leadership is influence, nothing more, nothing less. And that's what you're talking about, Ryan, is how can I vacate my seat so that the person up that I've trained can come up and sit there and take that. So it's not about titles, it's about that action plan. I like it. So let me ask you this. I did something on LinkedIn a while ago. I talked about 4 different things that we've got going on in today's world. Um, and this was probably May, I guess. And I shared briefly that we have 4 issues. One is COVID financially, one is COVID medically, third, we have a leadership issue. And the fourth is we have a diversity situation, an issue. So diversity has always been important ever since the beginning of time, right? And in this, we know now more than ever that our world is in desperate need. Our communities are in desperate need of help in understanding, respecting, and then celebrating that diversity. How could you speak to that?
The best way that I can or that I would like to address it and focus on why it's important is because I like to compare it to for example, when I'm talking with my wife, if we're exactly the same, we touch fewer lives than if we come to the table with differences that we can still uh, communicate about in a healthy manner to be able to share as we're becoming one. Because I believe when you're getting married, when you get married, you're becoming one. However, you have your life experiences. This person has their life experiences. The difference is, as opposed to looking at them as, oh, you're different than me in that way. I embrace differences because differences allow for two people that are becoming one to become stronger, because that gives them that much more experience, or that many more topics to touch on. Let's think about it in the business sense. If everybody in the business is the same, how how international can that business become?
Right.
Um, how 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 um, how far can their product reach? How many different ideas can that business gain to be able to grow? I remember, because I'm 20 years in corporate America. I remember when I was 18 and I signed this sheet in HR, and it was saying that basically I was signing my ideas away. So any ideas that I got that if they were related to that company I was working for, they owned those ideas. And so, I bring that up to mention, if you're in an organization that's not diverse, well, neither are your ideas, neither is your reach. And I'd like to take it a next step further, Chris, because you know diversity is something that a lot of companies have been improving over the years. Where I see a lot of misunderstanding or misinterpretation is inclusion, because you can invite me out to the party, but if you don't play any of my music, then I'm not going to dance.
Right.
So, when you're thinking about inclusion, you're really taking a step back to think, okay, how can I help? Okay, we've welcomed in, these individuals. Yes, we have a community within this organization that's diverse, but how can we make everyone feel welcome? How can we make everyone feel as though what matters to them matters to us all, even if we don't all agree? We can take holidays, for example. How can we, we know some individuals celebrate certain holidays, some don't celebrate any holidays at all. How can we come up with ways where every individual still feels as though, even if they're one within an organization, what matters to them matters to the organization? That's inclusion. When you're thinking in that type of mindset, and we have some opportunities. I think the biggest thing that we have to focus on is speaking up. A lot of times situations, they come and they pass, and people think that nothing really took place, or someone, there wasn't an opportunity to improve. And if you're not speaking up, you know I don't expect the person sitting across the table to be able to hear what I'm thinking, if you know what I mean. So if I don't say something, I can't be mad at them for not taking these considerations. But once I speak up, now I put the ball in your court to then do something. What's your action?
Yeah, Ryan, as you were talking, and I was absolutely enthralled with what you were saying. There was a couple thoughts that came to my mind about speaking up and under that umbrella of inclusion, which is absolutely desperately needed in today's community and workplace. Um, and that is this. When we talk about speaking up, I think that people have to be in the right frame of mind, if you will, to go ahead and speak up. We can say things to one another, but if the tone in our voice isn't appropriate, um, nobody's going to listen. And I also go
Absolutely.
back, and I also go back to your word that you started our time off together with, and that's servitude. And really, that idea of servant leadership, you're leading with empathy. And if we can literally, if I can put myself as much as I can in your shoes, or you in mine, or ours in somebody else's, then we really truly try to understand. And so, therefore, active listening is about listening to understand rather than respond.
Right, right. I
And
completely agree.
good.
Completely agree.
So together, you and I can change the world.
Yes, let's do it. Sign up. I mean,
So
and I will say that situations within a body of people will force those type of considerations. What I mean by that is in many situations, Chris, I can't afford not to be considerate
mm,
because of the impact of me not being considerate. A lot of times is more impactful on my life or my career than maybe the person next to me. If we're talking about diversity, race, and inclusion more specifically, the best way I can give you an example. I was joking with my buddy on the golf course, and me and my wife, uh, we were playing around the previous week, and my golf ball went out of bounds into another, somebody's neighbor, into somebody's backyard, but they didn't have a fence, so you could easily just walk right in and grab your golf ball. And so we were paired up with another couple, white couple. We all had a great time just conversing back and forth. And I walked up to where it said out of bounds, and I saw a sign that said no trespassing. First and foremost, Chris, I made sure to look for a sign because I know that property is not mine. The guy that we were playing with, he came running up and he was like, "Oh, your ball went right over there. Just go grab it." I was like, "Are you sure?" He was like, "No, yeah, just go grab it." And I was like, "No, I don't think I'm gonna go grab it." And he was like, "No, sure, I'll go grab it." I was like, "Okay, yeah, please go grab my ball." And he went and grabbed it and came right back without a hesitation or a thought. And then once he handed me my ball and I pointed out to him why I hesitated, that was the first point in which he even thought of anything like that. Why do you think that is? Because for me, I've had experiences where I've walked in somebody's yard, and that could be a life and death situation.
sure.
And while it may be a tough subject to talk on, it's still a fact. The eye opening thing on the situation that I'm pointing out is how it wasn't a thought for the other gentleman. And once he realized that, he had to take a step back, like, wow, you actually live having to think about stuff like that.
Right.
Because him going into the yard getting the golf ball, he would have gotten the benefit of the doubt. Oh, he must be in the yard to get a golf ball. Me walking into the yard to get the golf ball, oh, what's he doing? He must be going. Yes, I got on my polo and my golf gear and this and that, but what's he doing in this yard? He must be come into my house, or this and that, things that you wish you didn't have to think.
Right.
So again, I bring this up because these conversations sometimes are tough, but if we have these conversations in a healthy manner, I think the awareness is where we can start the change.
Totally agree. Totally agree. And what stopped you though, Ryan? What stopped you from not sharing the no trespassing sign with him before he walked onto the private property?
I wanted to see what happened. What do you mean? I was gonna tell him that no, he didn't look for the trespassing sign. I was gonna have his back, but this was an experiment for me. Sure, I'm gonna. He said he can go get the golf ball. He's 20 years, at least 20 years older than I am, so he's been on this earth with more experiences than I have. Who am I to tell him he can't go into that yard or to look for a trespassing sign? Again, I look for him because I can't afford not to.
Right, right. I understand. And in that I think that's going to resonate with the people listening. And that's what we're talking about with the inclusion portion of this is listening with empathy, um, recognizing that we need to understand and be okay with asking questions, right?
Correct. Right.
That's how we get the information. Let's ask questions. But I would
Right.
also assume that we've got to ask the right people the right questions,
Right.
because
Correct.
sometimes the behavior of you and me, and I'm just using us as general terms, you and me as people, our behavior can affect our leadership, right?
Correct.
Our
Correct.
behavior can affect our empathy. If I'm having a bad day and whatever, there's numerous cases out there. So, let me ask you this. So there's a gentleman by the name of John Maxwell, leadership guru out there. He talks about it being better to prepare than repair. So he talks about it's better to prepare than repair. As a society, which is happening, as a society, which is happening, and can both be done at the same time.
That's a good question. Um, I thought I came up with that statement because I have something similar that I say in my profession. I say it's better to be proactive than reactive.
Yep.
And I believe as a society as a whole, we're reactive. We're emotional. We make some of our biggest strides, and you know we have some of our largest group of activists when we're emotional. And you know I tend to, I'm all for it, and I'm fully, let's take the momentum and let's continue it forward. But I also like to say and present, well, what are we going to do when times are good? What I mean by that is I think that way. When times are good, well, we need, what are we doing to celebrate that? What are we doing to point out times are good? So let's look at it from proactive versus reactive standpoint. Um, when times are good, that's when we'll talk about resources. That's when we tend to use more of our resources, in this world. That's when we tend to, maybe go on more vacations. So we're spending more gas. We tend to, maybe eat more or eat different types of foods, that maybe, don't give back to the earth, the best way. What I mean by that is, when we're partying and stuff like that, we're eating different types of foods versus when we're, in a mindset of nutrition. When we're happy, we're thinking in terms of, let me just do whatever I just want to do. And a lot of what we want to do isn't in line with thinking about taking care of what our next generation is going to be left with. So again, I think you bring up a really good question. I think that's a question as well. I don't like to speak in on topics that I'm not versed in, and I think that that's a topic that can be more specific in many different avenues. So if I'm talking about business or telecommunications, or from a standpoint of parenting and raising children, I believe there's a lot of opportunity for us to be more proactive. I think most of our biggest, again, our biggest actions come when something happens that we're trying. Oh, now we're trying to scramble to fix it, as opposed to having that insurance in place ahead of time to make sure that if something happens, we already have a fix in place. So I do think we can do it all at the same time. I think there's a balance, a healthy balance to being able to have a certain level of insurance and protections in place. But at the same time, I don't believe in living life in anxiety or fearing the unknown. So, at the same time, you can only control what you can control. And that's why everything for me is found, my foundation is back on my faith, because I find in the Bible how I'm supposed to eat, how I'm supposed to take care of the earth, how I'm supposed to treat others, how I'm supposed to utilize my resources in a mindset of, making sure I'm leaving for the next generation. So, when I'm following scripture in that type of manner, then it is a proactive type of mindset. But when I'm thinking about myself and just what I want, or I'm happy, and we're just, la di da, just, walking through life, then you're thinking about just what your need is in the moment. And almost, in my opinion, 9 times out of 10, that's emotional. So it's not connected to helping your tomorrow.
Right. Yeah, that's good. How do how can we promote leadership diversity and inclusion?
I think that goes back again to awareness and doing what we're doing right now, willing to have the conversation in a healthy setting, um, being willing to listen, and I think through that we're taking a step in acknowledgement, because the biggest issues a lot of times have been tied into people acting like there is no issue and not acknowledging. And now that it's, in front of our face, and we have cameras and we have, technology that allows for us to, it allows for these issues to be undeniable. We have to sit at the table, or you're sitting at the table with your back turned, uncomfortable. So what we're doing, Chris, I believe is the best first step, is awareness and willing to have the communication in a healthy setting, so that both sides, and when I say both sides, like we're in America. So if we're here in America, if you're on this side, it's simply because you believe this way. If you're on this side, it's simply because you believe this way. And no matter what side you're on, we're still all in the same land. And my mom, she'll say, a land that has discourse is a land, that is destined for failure, destined, for doom. And we can't build this nation. Even it was built, and we're not going to go down that rabbit hole, but we can't continue building this nation on calamity.
Agreed. Agreed. Well, I'm glad to have you a part of this conversation, Ryan. I think that sides need to be removed. I think that peace, harmony need to be restored. I think that there needs to be a proactive approach,
Agreed.
And it does start by sitting at the table. And I thank you for sitting there at that table with me, sir. Let me ask you just a couple quick questions. This is an exit question. Um, what is one mistake that you're witnessing leaders make today?
I think the biggest mistake I see leaders make today is thinking that they can manage everyone the same, not taking the time to get to know each individual as an individual, which takes time. It takes patience. Um, we, as leaders, a lot of times leaders are they're strong in their will and their desire and their direction, and it's difficult for them to take a step back and say, well, you know what, I need to humble myself and care about each of you individually, and the way I'm managing John may not be the way I'm managing Eric, and the way I'm managing Jeremy is not going to be the same way that I'm managing Latanya. So when you're thinking about that way, I know that's one of the biggest attributes that set me apart from other leaders, was taking that time, spending extra time during my one-on-ones to find out about how their life is personally, not because I was, just wanting to have the conversation. I was truly engaged and truly caring, because there was value there, and that allowed for me to understand what's the best way for me to, to have the conversations of encouragement, of setting expectations and accountability. And when you think about accountability, I mean, you're in the workplace, you're not about to sit somebody down and spank them, if they don't do the right thing. You have to have the right conversation that's going to allow that person to feel, what, let me take a good look at this. And saying you're going to fire someone isn't always, the best method. And so, when you take the time to get to know individuals, you'll find the best ways to motivate and to have these conversations, especially again, when we're tying it back around accountability, which we're all accountable to someone.
Right. Yep. All right. So exit question, like I said, what's one main takeaway that you want people to hear right now?
I would say, just really focusing on the difference. If you're a leader out there, understanding that you have to keep challenging yourself to get better. I'll say this quote, I say it often. One of my managers used to always say, if adversity causes some to break, it's some to break records. And he would always get in my face. So, what are you? That was a method that really resonated with me. And so I just encourage everyone to, be willing to humble yourself and look in the mirror and say, if your results aren't where they are, what can you do more? But even if your results are where they are, what can you do to even go to the next level? And a lot of that is, if your leader is tied around in what are you doing for your team? What are you doing to lead by example and to remove obstacles? Are you truly thinking in the mindset of servitude? And don't look at that as a bad word. Don't look at servitude or I like to say the phrase, washing someone's feet. Don't look at that as a bad word. Look at that as an opportunity to humble yourself and say, even the greatest, in this world from a leadership standpoint, they're the ones that are first to say, what can I do for you?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, those are amazing remarks to close us out. Ryan, I thank you so much for who you are, what you bring not only to your business, but to the community as well. Thank you so much for being on this. And we're going to have you back here very, very shortly.
Absolutely, Chris. It was definitely a pleasure, and thank you for the invite. I look forward to seeing the different individuals and that we're able to touch and hopefully getting some feedback. So thanks again for having me, and I look forward to next time.
Agreed. Thanks again and have a great one.
Yes, sir.